Great.
Hi, good evening everyone. Apologies for the technical difficulties. We had to abandon Facebook Live. My name is Melanie Lynch and I'm the founder and CEO of Herstory. And this evening we have a very special guest for you, Mary Kennedy, founder of the Celtic Wheel. To introduce Mary, she's a women's leadership coach, an integral facilitator, well-being consultant, mindfulness trainer, Celtic wisdom holder, yoga teacher and entrepreneur. In 2016, Mary co-created Census of the Heart with Kathy Scott from the Trailblazery. This was an alternative census in Ireland which took place to mark the centenary of the 1916 Rising. At that time, my mum and I were developing the inaugural Heart of Ireland Festival, and I vividly recall hearing about Census of the Heart and thinking, who are the women behind this visionary project? Now I'm blessed to call both Kathy and Mary my soul sisters. Mary has been absolutely instrumental to her story. She is one of my right-hand women. And as a specialist in coaching women on their leadership journey, she's my strategic advisor and life coach. I'm currently immersed in Mary's transformational 21st Century Sovereign Woman program, a one-to-one coaching journey, which I highly recommend to any woman who wants to explore her innate wisdom and step up into her true authentic power. The rise and empowerment of the feminine is absolutely paramount in these challenging times. And like, if you think about it, humanity is at a tipping point. There's a sense that we're on the precipice of a new world. And I really believe that Mary has one of the keys to unlock this new enlightened future. It's called the Celtic Wheel, and she's going to tell us all about it tonight. So Mary, over to you. How did you discover the Celtic Wheel and the Celtic tradition?
Well, thanks first, Melanie, for that really lovely, amazing introduction. Yeah, and it's great to be here. I'm such a big fan of yours and of her story, and such the work you do and how you shine a light on all those women and those untold stories is certainly for me and my generation. It's an amazing, amazing thing that you're doing. So how did I discover the Celtic tradition? Well, I discovered it really many years ago when I was a student in UCD, and I was studying archaeology. And I was a kind of accidental student of archaeology because I had failed all my exams in first year, and somebody said, "Oh, archaeology is really easy to pass." So I went and decided, okay, I'll choose archaeology as one of my subjects.
The honesty.
Well, I was a party girl.
Amen.
There were more important things than just studying in college. So I did it, but what I encountered there was, a great department, a really interesting whole module around the Celts, and also folklore. Those were my two favorites. So I kind of, even though I was accidental, I ended up really loving archaeology. So that's where I initially encountered the Celtic. The whole Celtic piece, but then, so that was in an academic level. And then when I was in my early 40s and my father had just died, I was in a very deep place of letting go of an old life. And, then my father dying was profound in my life. And I met my teacher in the Celtic tradition, Dolores Whelan. And that felt like a very auspicious meeting at this time of a lot of death in my life and endings and loss and letting go. And then I suppose since then that was profound, and I'll come back to that, I think, more, because I was really in between worlds myself, just as the world is. There's a great quote, I can't remember who said, about wandering between worlds. In that point I discovered the Celtic tradition. And then more recently, since then, I take the archaeological, the more academic. I took then what Dolores offered me in terms of teaching was more mystical teachings in a way. And now I really just go out in the land and listen, or I let the mythology teach me.
Beautiful.
And I think that's the way, that's really where I get the wisdom. But, it's a lovely braiding of all those three strands that give me access into that indigenous wisdom that's so in our bones in this country, but I suppose what's important is I was in between worlds, walking. I was letting an old world go. I had got burned out at the end of my 30s. I was, you know, I was living the dream as I thought.
I've been there.
And most people would kind of look at my life and think, God, she was living the dream. I was, flying around the world. I was working for Mary McAleese in her first term. But underneath, there was a deep, I wasn't living congruently to my soul, and as happens when you're not living congruently, your life starts to fall apart. And of course, I was not really listening. I was, was getting nudges from the universe or the great mystery or whatever you want to call it, consciousness, just a little bit of knocks here and there, but I was beautifully avoiding all of them until it all fell apart. So I often think my life at that stage is a bit like where we are on the planet now in humanity. It's just like one world was just falling apart. The ground was going from beneath me. I had nothing, no sense of reference point to hold on to, no handrail. And part of that was my dad dying. And I got out to the Hazelwood in Sligo because I'm from Sligo, and he was in the great beautiful hospice there in Sligo for a week, close to a week, as he was dying and passing over. And I at one point just couldn't kind of get hold of him. I was like, "Where are you, Dad?" And I went out to the Hazelwood in this, it's such an enchanted wood in Sligo, and I sat in between the hazel trees, and there were blue bells.
Oh, magical. Yeah.
He was a great man who walked the land, and prayed. He was a deep man of the land. And I just kind of got this sense of connection to Ireland and the land. And a week later, after he had died, I kind of was asking him for guidance as he was leaving. And after he died, a week later, I met Dolores Whelan, and I felt there's some connection to that moment in Hazelwood. And I just started to study with the wonderful Dolores, who's a repository and a holder of this wisdom, and held it for many years before the rest of us kind of came in to catch up. So that's how I discovered it. And I was living a life up to that was very, it was the patriarchal life. I was in that place of just a slave to success and a slave to, even though it was very subtle. I mean, it didn't look like I was like that, but it was an old way of being, of unhealthy masculine, of drive of, that just, and that's why I got burnt out. So what the Celtic tradition or what that gave me was in between worlds, when we're in the liminal, that's when the psyche reaches for something outside the rational. And I think that's what I felt is I suddenly found meaning in my life through this tradition and its mythology and its symbolism and the archetypes. And that really, and then when I discovered the Celtic Wheel, I was completely blown away, because it's like it gave me this map,
Wow.
a map. And I was like, okay, this is what's happening in my life. So I'm in the death phase of my life. There's a death phase happening to me, and it's okay. Like the Celts trusted and honored death, and they honored polarity, and they honored that death, that they would, that if I really surrendered to the Cailleach or to the hag, to what was wanting to die in me, that actually the maiden would be born out of that. And I would come into my springtime again. So it was really, that's how I encountered it. So
what a journey. What a story into the labyrinth and emerging out, huh? Magical.
Absolutely.
And it's a journey that you brought me on in the last 6 months, and I'm forever grateful. It is the wisdom it's absolutely stunning. It's very much alive in the land and emerging through all of us. So I suppose a note on that, my next question would be, how can the Celtic tradition, the wisdom of our ancestors, how can it help us to navigate this time of great uncertainty and crisis?
Well, a bit like what I went through personally, in a way, it really holds me, held me through that time. And as we are between stories, between worlds, we're entering the liminal, and in that place is it like it's really difficult to be in transition. But
Yeah.
one of the greatest gifts that the Celtic tradition offered me was the wisdom of cycles, you know,
Yeah.
of understanding that this is a death phase, and that we're in a bigger arc of a cycle if we can just move out of our small mind.
Yeah.
And just open to the fact that actually we can collapse into you know, this a narrative of everything's falling apart, nothing is the same, we're losing the old normal. And that's of course very easy to do, and of course we're all, you know, we've threat in our system. It's scary when everything starts
Yeah.
to fall apart, but it's all structures of the patriarchy that are falling apart, really, that
Yeah.
no
And they
longer,
need to.
and they really need to,
Yeah.
you know, because as the great Carol Gilligan would define, patriarchy is
Yeah.
a way of living that privileges one man over another, you know, whether it's, you know, privileges straight over gay, rich over poor, black over or white over black,
Yeah.
and all men over women, she says, you know. So, and it's not just men and women are both victims of the patriarchy,
It's
and I
very
think
important. Yeah.
it's really important to say that. So this old system of living privileges and is based on dominance, you know, and
Power over.
yeah, power over,
Yeah.
and a dominance that is always one up over
Yeah.
somebody else. That is dissolving. It's collapsing all around us. And what is emerging is new shoots of, it's not that there isn't a one up and one down, but that we're able to both be own and this, or I suppose we're going into a new relationship with power. So it's not this flat,
Yeah.
everybody is the same, but
No.
like sometimes someone will step up, and then other times I know when to wield power, when to let it go.
Yeah.
And in that is a deep uncertainty. It's like, well, who are we if we're not in
Yeah.
these old structures?
Mm.
And so with the Celtic tradition, it's that in between. They knew how to be the liminal in the Celtic tradition was something very sacred. You know,
Yeah.
liminal places were places like the seashore, or at power points, and at great old monuments and great old places of power. So the liminal was really respected.
Yeah.
The tradition, the death phase was very honored in the Celtic tradition.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And with the view that everything starts in the darkness, that we are born of the womb, you know, we're born and conceived in the womb. But that there's a knowledge, like if you think about Samhain coming up, like we're entering this dark time, and it is the new year in the Celtic tradition. So the Celts could teach us so much about our culture that always moves towards the bright, the bigger, the better, the faster. The overculture, everything is overstimulated, overproduction.
Oh, it's Bealtaine. It's not sustainable, of course not. But that's so profound, Mary, that to think that the beginning actually starts at the death phase.
Well, that's what had
What
me.
a contrast.
Yeah.
Wow. You know?
Like, and so you think about, as we move from Samhain to winter solstice, it's the darkest time. The deep invitation of that time is what needs to die. And in any death phase, in any death, we know, if you've had death in your life, it's a real leveler, because it basically says, well, what do we not need? You kind of start to let go of anything that's not needed. And we see that's happening now in our lives. I see so much amazing, beautiful things that are emerging from between human beings at this time. I know there's a lot of fear and a lot of you know, we're all having moments of sadness and anger and fear, but if you really drop into or open your perspective to see that this is a death, but in this death something new is arising.
Yeah.
And the winter solstice, from Samhain to the winter solstice, is the invitation to move into the void, into not knowing who you are, you know, this deep uncertainty. But in the void, there is the most fertile place, because
Wow, I love that.
it's possible.
The paradox is beautiful, isn't it? It's stunning. And to never be afraid of the void either, or the death, because from the death, the light emerges and a new way of being emerges. And I've been very much having that conversation with my friends and family and just acquaintances that I meet about the transformation that they're going through. So many people who struggle to find a daily meditation practice have now mastered that, and they're seeing a huge transformation in their lives.
Yeah.
And reconnecting with nature, with what really matters, you know, with good food, with family, with friends, with it's really back to what it fundamentally means to be human, which is very much rooted to the land, rooted to our ancient wisdom, which is emerging. It's so perfect, isn't it?
Well, I mean, the wheel is all about just it's inspired by cycle nature. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's one of the big things that we've seen. People are, you know, I know so many women who are back in the sea and are not even back, they're starting. They're like, I'm swimming every day since COVID because we can't go somewhere else.
I know.
So it's
That's
amazing.
it. As a confession, I swam in the sea today, and I never normally swim in October. And I had my wetsuit on. I didn't even need it. The sea was actually warm, but I started in March this year, and I'd normally only ever sea swim through the summer months. So yeah, it's fabulous. And the cleanse and the restaurant and just the connection with nature and the ionizing power of the sea. You just come alive in yourself, you know, and I'm not running to Dublin to meetings. I'm rerouting and coming back to my truth, you know. It's beautiful.
Yeah. And you know, that's the wildness of the sea. It's like the feminine, you know, too. Like the earth is the feminine.
The water.
It's connection to water, feminine, you know, all of that. Yeah. So that's, I mean, there's so much the Celtic, like all indigenous traditions, you know, on the planet now, they're really rising again, because what happened in the Enlightenment phase times was, you know, amazing progress. You know, it gave us a lot, but it dropped the old ways of knowing, the deep feminine ways of knowing. And now we're, you know, we transcended, but we didn't include those as we evolved. And now it's time for us to go back and pick those up so we can include and bring those different ways of knowing. And really they're here to guide us through this and help us navigate this time.
Beautiful. Stunning wisdom. So timely, really. So I'm curious, Mary, because you know Herstory is all about women's stories. I'm curious to know, who are the Celtic heroine archetypes that have inspired you in particular?
Well, I think, you know, it's coming up to Samhain, and I think what really, I remember Dolores in one of the retreats I went on, or the first retreats, I think was around Samhain actually. And when she spoke about the Cailleach, you know, that archetype of the Cailleach, the hag, and, you know, this, and it's very similar because you know, my yoga training, even in the sounding of the word of the Kali, you know, she's ugly, and she's, you know, she's rough, and she's tough, and she shakes you and says, what no longer serves, you must die, you know, you must let this part of you die, or, you know, what is no longer serving you. And there's a story told that if you let the hag kiss you, she turns into the maiden of springtime.
I've heard that.
So I love that transformation. I love that idea. I love this kind of, you know, like Kali in the Hindu tradition, who, you know, walks around with skulls, and, you know, she's death too. And it's like, so I just found, because I knew in myself that when I was living the other life that was not connected to my depths, but was very superficial. I mean, I was very happy, but there was something really not connected to my soul, really. That I was very much living the opposite of Samhain, which is Bealtaine. I was living, I was like, everything is fabulous. I want to, you know, everything was in the light. And I was denying this profound beauty of death and darkness. And so that was my big initial work, is to really let the Cailleach have her way with me. To let her, she was doing it anyway. She was shaking away anything, just like she comes and shakes the leaves off the trees, and the trees just effortlessly just let her take them. I wasn't so effortless.
Neither.
She took the things I was really identified with, but she's one. I really love the power of that, and the hag. And as I move into my my stage of life, which is perimenopausal into menopause, like I see that, the depth and the yeah, that real strength of the hag wisdom and the wisdom.
And she's greatly misunderstood as well, but she's very much emerging in so many enlightened, brilliant women that we know in our circle and beyond. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that'll be a big focus for her story going forward. We're doing an immersion on the menopause and the crone to really awaken the 21st century crone in all of her glory, and to give her the spotlight and to really a platform and a stage for the wisdom of our elders, because you just master souls. I mean, you are the maiden, the mother, and the crone, Mary. You are all three in mastery in that stunning dance.
Well, I think it's a bit like our evolution, that we transcend and include. So we always, like, even as you arrive into the crone, you bring with you the maiden and the mother.
Yeah.
Even though I was never a mother, as in I never gave birth to a child, I've moved through that mother, that archetype, in terms of wanting to have kids, not being able to have them, but also birthing projects like the Celtic Wheel. So, that's, I think that's really important. But I also feel that that every woman on the planet now holds a crone energy, because the feminine is very crone. And I mean, men too, because the feminine is not just women. I mean, there's feminine in men, have the feminine too. And it's crone energy that's rising. It's ancient crone energy that's rising.
Stunning. It's very powerful. Yeah. And tell us now more. Do you have another?
Yes.
I'm sure you've got many now up your sleeve. I don't believe there's only one.
Well, I was listening to the great, I think you put me in touch with them, Candlelit Tales.
Yeah.
I was listening to their most recent
find.
And what a find. And they were talking about Maeve, and like part of my journey with this Celtic tradition is I really am rooted in the Celtic Wheel, but I'm letting mythology, because I found the mythology even in college, like it's so complex. So I'm just letting myself find my way with it. So I was listening to the guys on Candlelight Tales, who are amazing. And their most recent one is about Maeve, and I'm from Sligo, so I grew up at the, shadow of Maeve's great, all of that landscape around there. And when I was listening to her, they were talking about her potency. She's like what I grew up as, a good girl. I was the good girl. That's the archetype
I don't believe it.
I'm telling you. I mean, I mostly was the good girl. It was kind of hidden in the background, was the bad girl, but mostly I was, I was high performance. We tend to, we usually take up one of those, the nice woman or the angry woman or the rebel, or the good girl. I was a good girl. So to rediscover Maeve and know about her potency, they were talking about like that she how potent she was in herself. And I really think that's a word that I really feel women, with our power, that we are so potent, but we let it, we don't really contain it. We let it disperse out, and she feels like, listening to that recently, I really felt like, oh my God, I can now really move towards Maeve, because archetypes are for me, archetypes are, the fundamental patterns of within our psyche, in a way, or within our behavior. It's not really a great definition, but they're fundamental patterns, like the mother archetype. So, and for me, the essence of an archetype can, if I resonate with an archetype, it's like it's teaching me about my becoming. So when I resonate with someone like Maeve in that story, it's like something in me wants to know more about that. What she represents, what she symbolizes, her essence is. And so, like, it's so interesting to then take these archetypes, these heroines, and look at them and go, okay, well, which some of them just don't resonate with me at all. I'm like, no. So I think they're a beautiful doorway into our becoming. you know.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And so I'm really feeling Maeve in these days now, which is brilliant because I didn't really, she didn't resonate with me that much before, you know.
That's interesting. Even though
Yeah.
you Sligo. Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah.
I mean, I kind of got it, but she was a bit too
Yeah.
kind of warrior or something for
Okay.
me. But there's part of me that needs to move more towards that.
Yeah.
And she really spoke to me with from that story
Mm.
as those brilliant candlelight tales, you know, and their discussion about her afterwards. I loved it.
Yeah, they're master storytellers and they really do their research as well.
Yeah, yeah.
They're pros, yeah. Fantastic. Wow. That's very insightful actually. The way you describe Maeve like that, I would have resisted her in the past as well, but I'm learning to embrace her more, having spent time with fellow Sligo natives like Maureen G and yourself, and to hear new stories. There's like, even like, we think we know these archetypes and these stories, and yet there's more layers and more stories that come out.
And I think archetypes can evolve too, you
Yeah,
know.
of course.
We were talking about the archetype of the crone and
Yeah.
how there's, you know, they don't just stay still back in history. So that's what I love about Candlelight Tales. They're really looking at them and pulling them apart and seeing, you know, how are they evolving too.
Yeah,
So
and there's always an opportunity to create new archetypes as well, like, which is what we're just exploring with the menopause at the moment. So there's these key transition phases as the earth is in transition. We
yeah,
as women are in transition, and how does that represent itself in an archetype and through art and culture, and to really understand it and then embody it, to work very consciously with that energy and that archetype. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Fab. Amazing. So tell us all about the Celtic Wheel. I'm very curious to hear more.
Well, the Celtic Wheel, in terms of like the program, is that what you mean, or do you mean the?
Yeah, the program. Yeah.
Well, the program is we're about to enter into our third cycle online,
Third one.
which is amazing. So I put it online really because there were two reasons. A lot of women were asking me, you know, I was doing the retreats, each of the 8 festivals. So I suppose for anybody who doesn't know, the Celtic Wheel itself is the wheel that tracks, it's like a calendar that tracks the 8 festivals, Celtic festivals or thresholds in the year. They're usually between 6 to 7 weeks in between each festival. And so it's a beautiful journey to take on so many levels to actually to do the whole cycle. I mean, I've done it every year for the last 11 years. And as you do it, you go into a deeper spiral. But what I did was I used to do retreats on the cross quarter days, you know, Samhain, Imbolc, Bealtaine and Lughnasa. And then a lot of women would say to me, I'd love to do the whole cycle, but they couldn't actually come and do, you know, come on 4 retreats a year. It's kind of a little expensive. So I remember sitting in meditation 2 years ago and just kind of it dropping in, why don't you do the Celtic Wheel online? So I looked into it and I literally organized it within 10 days. It was full.
That's incredible, Mary. So
It was
divine timing.
divine timing completely. I mean, I was completely shocked. I got 3 great women around me. I called them my creative doulas, and I just said, okay, I need to do this, and I don't have much time because Samhain was about to happen, and literally within 10 days the whole thing happened and we were full, and it was gone global, or even in that first one. So people were, but what it is about, I suppose what it's about is that bringing women together so we can journey around the wheel together, we can do ritual together, we can really celebrate each of those, do it online, and that there, you know, in every festival and every season there are energies that, because the energies change aligned to the seasons, and as we move through the seasons there's invitation and gifts and challenges in each festival in each season. So there are themes that we can work with as women. Particularly I'm interested in the journey as the heroine's journey, and for me doing the Celtic Wheel brought me back to really reclaim my buried feminine, which I had lost.
Wow.
You know, living that other life far away from myself, or as James Joyce says, a little, you know, a few feet away from my own self. I was kind of living out there. And so as what I discovered with the wheel actually was that as I started to, because the first half of the year is the dark half of the year, the feminine principle. So the heroine's journey for me is we reclaim the feminine, and then by reclaiming the feminine, bringing her into maturing that feminine into the healthy feminine, then the natural healthy masculine arises out of that. And so we move into the bright half of the year. So that's what it is. It's women all over the planet just coming together, working with all this ancient wisdom, working also with contemporary wisdom, because I'm interested in where the nexus of, the contemporary wisdom, neuroscience, psychology, developmental science, which is really important to me, and then bringing the ancient wisdom together with that, and then activating the innate wisdom in each woman, which I really believe there's a feasa in every woman on the planet. So bringing those two hands together and just like getting really to activate wisdom in women, so that wherever they are on the planet, they become these power centers of wisdom, and they're affecting their lives and their homes and their communities and their workplaces. Like people have been bringing it in. One amazing woman brought it in. She's down in Sligo. She brought it into her tech company. Like she presented this whole thing around female leadership in the tech world using the Celtic Wheel. Like other people are bringing it in. There was another great woman who was on it this year, and she's brought it into her yoga nidras. I was just listening to some of her yoga nidras. She's bringing the Celtic through into that. Others are, like there was a beautiful woman asking me, can I get the poster of the Celtic Wheel, because I want my kids to look at it and
wow.
It's going into home. That's what I want. It's my dream, is that this wisdom just is a way that we can all work at everybody rising together, So it's a year-long program.
Okay.
And it's like a real soul call. I feel this very deeply. I got this image this year. Every year it seems to give me a different image, but I got an image of women all over the planet, like a river system, like tributaries all connecting together. And so we're like connecting to the water, connecting, in the Celtic tradition, bodies of water are related to healing and transformation and the feminine, and women gathered at water in our mythology. So it's like this system of river system, that as each tributary joins up, it becomes more powerful together, and that we're all connected in this river of wisdom around the planet together. So it is absolutely a soul call. It's like people say to me, should I do it? Do you think I should do it? I'm like, sit with it, feel it. If it's a really strong yes, then your soul is calling to it. Great. If it's not, don't do it out of FOMO, fear of missing out. It's like, because you won't, it's really important to me that women, if you go on the website, you look at it, you feel into it, and then you sit with it. And because there are two ways of doing it. You can do it on your own, which is you get videos and worksheets, so you can work through the festivals yourself, or you can do level 2, is where you really come into community with women and work the wisdom together and meet in ritual together. So there are two ways of doing it also. Yeah.
And I've sat in, as you recommended. I sat with it and I tuned in, and my God, did I get a yes, a hell of a yes, to answer the soul call and do the Celtic Wheel this year. I'm so excited. So tell us now, what's the deadline for signing up?
Well, the deadline is the 21st of October. But we're like over half full at the moment. So if it fills that, it obviously we'll have to close it. But I have a cap it, because it's really important to me that I work with kind of numerology and sacred numbers. And it's really important to me also that it is not too big. It's not this big massive, it's just it keeps its potency and also the intimacy for women. So that's we're over half full now today. So yeah, just keep an eye out, really. We let people know if we're, close to filling. But yeah, but I really trust it. I mean, I sent out, a kind of spiral of a call out into the winds and down out into the sea when I was in the sea in Dublin, in Dublin Bay. That's how I kind of launched it out. So if you hear the call, you'll know. It feels like a soul call,
Fantastic. Brilliant. Wonderful. And it starts on Samhain. So that's the 30th of October?
The 30th of September, or of October, yeah. That's our first call is then. But level 2 closes on the 21st. Level 1, I will keep open, past Samhain, because I mean, even though it is self-led, but at each festival you get the materials. So I wouldn't leave it open for the whole year, but I'll just leave it open probably past Samhain for people. Sometimes people discover it after we're closed, and it's nice that they have something to guide them through the festival.
Wow. Wonderful. And I'm just tuning in now, and I'm starting to get a picture, starting to get a sense of how this could even influence my work with Herstory going forward, and the gratitude that I have to you, Mary, for the journey you brought me on already through the 21st Century Sovereign Woman program, which I'd highly recommend to any woman who wants one-to-one enlightened coaching. But to do this immersion together with a group of women, to be held the way you hold space and with the wisdom that you're bringing through, and the teachers, and it's going to be spectacular. And what a time going into, we're going into a transition period worldwide, a global pandemic, and a roadmap, a labyrinth to emerge.
Yeah. And I think, what's really interesting is to watch my own journey, even from last year, is at Samhain, one of the things we work with is what needs to die, what is no longer serving you. And I let go of the lone wolf of just doing everything on my own. And this year, what's amazing at the end of the cycle is I brought in two brilliant way showers, Lydia and Teen, who've worked with me before. They're in to help hold the community and bring their beautiful wisdom in. And so it's more collective wisdom. Mm-hmm. And then Dolores has also agreed to come in as the guest elder. So it's like, that's how it works us, it worked to me from letting go of that part of me that was like, I'm always doing it on my own. I can't do it anymore. And then suddenly, when you work consciously with these things, the wheel works you the whole way. And it's like, so I feel really, really grateful for that, and very full. And part of what we're going to really work with this year is new sisterhood and sovereignty, and how to be in service to the world. And that new sisterhood of women coming together is a really important piece, and how we can all raise each other up.
Oh, I love that. So spot on. Really very powerful. Wonderful. Okay. So where can people find out more information?
So go to thecelticwheel.com. That's where it's all at. I'm going to have a webinar next Monday as well, because a lot of people are ask me questions, and I just find it's easier to just have like an open house. I'll talk a little bit about the Celtic Wheel and about those 3 themes of sovereignty, in service, and new sisterhood. And then I'll open it up for questions, so that people can get a sense of me, and also ask me any questions about the program, if they're like, shouldn't I join? So that's next Monday, and that will be on my, on Facebook or Instagram account. I'll have details of all of that.
Super. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Mary. This has been a really enlightened conversation.
Thank you, Annie. Well, a joy. I'm
really looking forward to joining on the journey now with the Celtic Wheel.
Amazing. I'm delighted you're joining in. Amazing.
Yeah. Thrilled. Many of our Herstory followers too. So
brilliant. Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you for everything that you do.
Pleasure.